All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Truth in the Age of Lies, a guide to navigating the information wars. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. The Wallet Ruse, why her lost purse is parasitic warfare, comfort is cultural cyanide, and the red-pilled road to rational sovereignty. I look upon the smoking ruins of Western civilization, and I do not see a tragedy, I see a crime scene. You have been gaslit by a demonic cabal of cultural Marxists and their useful idiots, stripped of your heritage, and told that your natural masculinity is a pathology requiring a therapeutic cure. They have taken the transcendentals, the true, the good, and the beautiful, and buried them under a landfill of equity and inclusion. You are living in a simulation of reality, a matrix woven from lies, where the TV screen demands you applaud the desecration of your own daughters and the castration of your own sons. I'm not here to offer you a safe space or a plush toy to cuddle. I am here to hand you a rhetorical flamethrower and show you how to burn the heresy to the ground. We are going to dissect the necrotic tissue of the modern zeitgeist with the scalpel of the trivium, proving through syllogism that the leftist worldview is not merely incorrect, but a logical impossibility that collapses under the weight of its own internal contradictions. Consider the lost wallet gambit on a first date, a seemingly innocuous event that the blue-pilled simps among you accept as a clumsy accident. You reach for the check. She feigns a frantic search of her purse, and you, the dutiful domesticated utility, shell out your hard-earned capital to cover the mistake. You think you are being a gentleman. You are actually failing a biological stress test designed by a hypergamous nature that seeks to separate the wheat of the alpha from the chaff of the beta provider. A woman who forgets her wallet is running a diagnostic on your spine. If you pay without hesitation, you signal that you are a resource to be extracted, a slave to the genocentric imperative. We will utilize the Schopenhauerian lens to reveal that this is not romance, but economic warfare. You are being measured for a yoke, and by validating her deceit, you have voluntarily stepped into the harness. The only winning move is the stoic refusal, a declaration that your resources are the product of your life's blood and are not community property for the first comer with a pretty smile. Then there is the psychological warfare of the comfort versus solutions dialectic. You come home to find her spiraling in emotional chaos, and like a man of logic and virtue, you offer a remedy to the problem. You are met not with gratitude, but with rage. I don't want a solution. I want you to listen. This is the mantra of the lunatic asylum. To prioritize listening over solving is to participate in a ritual of madness, a rejection of the logos that built the very roof over your heads. This demand for emotional tamponry is a symptom of the toxic femininity rotting the core of our institutions. We will expose this therapy speak for what it is, a tool of oppression designed to paralyze the masculine agent of order. We are entering a war for the soul of the West, and we will identify the enemies of truth from the radical parenting goblins who wish to lobotomize your male children, to the corporate misandry that celebrates your unemployment as diversity. Prepare to swallow the red pill, choke on the truth, and emerge reborn in the fire of your own sovereignty. The ledgers of deceit, exposing the economic warfare of the lost wallet test. Money is the barometer of a society's virtue, Ayn Rand once asserted. And when you look at the modern dating marketplace, the mercury isn't just dropping, it's shattered at the bottom of the glass. Consider the lost wallet test, a seemingly banal social phenomenon that is actually a vital dialectical probe in the information wars. You sit across from a woman at a bistro. The conversation flows adequately, and then the bill arrives. Suddenly, her purse is missing, or she performs that frantic, theatrical pat-down of her pockets. The blue-pilled simps, trained like Pavlov's dogs by a culture of toxic femininity, will immediately swoop in to save her, whipping out their credit cards to cover the cost. But understand this, you are not performing an act of chivalry. You are submitting to a ritual of financial cuckoldry. This is not a clumsy accident. It is a calculated bioeconomic strategy, a probe by the female hindbrain to determine if you are a high-status, logos-driven patriarch or a compliant, servile provider to be exploited. To understand the depth of this deceit, we must consult the etymological roots of the very system we inhabit. The word economy descends from the Greek oikonomia, meaning management of a household. It implies stewardship, resource allocation, and the rational ordering of one's domain according to natural law. Contrast this with the modern gynocentric imperative, which functions not as an economy, but as a mechanism of extraction. When a woman forgets her wallet, she is violating the first principle of oikonomia, the preservation of resources. By paying for her, you are not being nice, you are rewarding deceit and subsidizing incompetence. You are failing the stewardship of your own household before it has even been formed. A man who cannot defend the borders of his own bank account is undoubtedly incapable of defending the borders of his family or his civilization against the encroaching rot of cultural Marxism. Let us deploy the weaponized logic of the trivium to dismantle this trap once and for all. Major premise: a social interaction based on truth requires equitable exchange and honest representation. Minor premise: the lost wallet maneuver is a fabrication of distressed design to extract unearned resources from a male target. Conclusion: therefore, acquiescing to this demand validates a lie and violates the transcendental of truth. It is that simple. The cultural Marxists and their feminist handmaidens have redefined equality to mean female choice with male liability. They scream about independence while demanding dependency. This is the gamma bias inherent in the progressive worldview. When the bill comes, we are suddenly thrust back into the patriarchy of 1850, yet when the marriage contract dissolves, we are in the progressive utopia of no-fault divorce and asset stripping. You cannot have it both ways, but they will try to force you to pay for both tickets. Do not mistake this test for a harmless flirtation. It is a diagnostic tool used by the hypergamous instinct to measure your threshold for manipulation. Biologically, a woman seeks a man of high status and resolute frame, a man who commands resources, not one who surrenders them at the first sign of feigned distress. When you simp for the lost wallet, you are signaling to her evolutionary hindbrain that you are a low-value beta desperate for approval, willing to trade your hard-earned capital for a fleeting smile. You are admitting that your logos reason is subservient to her pathos emotion. History shows that civilizations crumble when men abandon reason for sentiment. Rome did not fall because the barbarians were stronger, but because the Roman male had become softened by decadence and unwilling to enforce the boundaries of his own sovereignty. The remedy to this spiritual and financial decay is the Stoic refusal. When the bill comes and the wallet is lost, you do not get angry, you do not apologize, and you never pay. You simply apply the principle of reciprocity. You smile, look her in the eye with the unshakable frame of a Stoic sage, and say, "That is unfortunate. I'm sure the restaurant accepts returns for the dishwashing shift." This is not cruelty, it is the re-establishment of the natural law of equitable exchange. You force her to confront her own agency. By refusing to be the simp, you shatter the frame of the damsel in distress and assert your dominance over the material plane. You demonstrate that you are a man of value who does not barter his resources for the company of a deceiver. Break the spell of gynocentrism. Keep your ledger balanced and let the wasteful expenditures of the simps fund the decline. You are here to build the future, But the theft of your coin is merely the low-hanging fruit for the cultural Marxist. Once the fortress of your finances has been breached, the assault turns toward the citadel of your mind. Do not delude yourself that the lost wallet was an isolated skirmish, for it was the precursor to a far more insidious rape of reason. The gynocentric matrix does not merely require your labor, it demands the total surrender of your rational faculty, forcing a transition from the material extraction of the provider to the spiritual lobotomy of the listener. The tyranny of therapy speak, weaponizing comfort against competence. Validation is the counterfeit of virtue, a sugary poison peddled by an effeminate culture terrified of the harsh contours of reality. You have been groomed by a gynocentric matrix to believe that your highest calling is to serve as an emotional tampon for the neuroses of the modern woman, absorbing her chaotic humors without objection. This is the listening trap, a sophisticated form of psychological subjugation dressed in the soft language of care. The feminist imperative commands you to just listen, which translated from the newspeak of the woke orthodoxy means abdicate your sovereignty, silence your logic, and validate my delusion. By stripping you of your problem-solving agency, the culture reduces you from a paterfamilias capable of dispensing wisdom to a domesticated appliance, a mere mirror reflecting back her infinite self-absorbed grievance. You are not being asked to engage in dialectic. You are being commanded to participate in a monologue of madness. And if you dare to interject with the sword of truth, you are branded a tyrant. We must identify the cognitive distortion operating here, a phenomenon known as gamma bias. This is the societal programming that values female emotional expression, no matter how hysterical or detached from reality, over male logical resolution. The matrix demands you apologize for your competence. Consider the etymology of the subversion. Comfort comes from the Latin confortar, to strengthen. Yet, in the clown world of modern relationships, comfort has been mutated into a narcotic. It is the act of weakening the mind by validating error. When you prioritize feelings over facts, you are not being kind. You are engaged in a cowardly betrayal of the logos. The Marxist dialectic thrives on this inversion, convincing men that their natural inclination toward solutions is toxic masculinity, while rewarding the feminine propensity for endless, circular emotional venting as emotional intelligence. This is a lie. True intelligence is the ability to solve problems. Everything else is merely noise. Allow me to demonstrate the absurdity of this dynamic with a formal argument, lest the emotionalists accuse us of unfeeling brutality. The syllogism of the sovereign mind is as follows. Major premise: problems exist in objective reality and require objective solutions to be resolved truth. Minor premise: emotional venting without solution, seeking perpetuates the existence of the problem, stasis. Conclusion: therefore, offering comfort over solutions is an act of collaboration with chaos and a betrayal of the good. This logic is irrefutable. When a man offers a solution, he is engaging in the highest form of love. He is attempting to alleviate suffering by aligning the woman's reality with the truth. To reject the solution in favor of venting is to choose the suffering, to worship the problem as an idol. This is the psychology of the child, yet it is the mandated interaction mode for adult men in the West. Consider the tragic comedy of the modern male who attempts to intervene in his partner's distress. A friend of mine, a brilliant engineer, once listened to his girlfriend spiral into a hysteria about her career, a classic avalanche of angst. Being a rational man, he applied the trivium, analyzed the data, and proposed a three-step plan to secure her promotion and neutralize her toxic boss. The reaction? She exploded in rage, accusing him of not validating her lived experience. He was berated for his competence. This is the gaslighting of the competent. The system trains women to view male competence as an attack on their ego. In this inverted reality, the man who fixes the leak is the villain because he didn't first weep into the puddle. It is a test of frame that most men fail. Apologizing for their own utility. Do not apologize. Her anger is the friction of a lies-based worldview colliding with the reality you represent. This comfort-first pathology is not merely an annoyance in the domestic sphere. It is the virus that kills civilizations. It represents the triumph of the feminine principle, stasis, emotion, over the masculine principle, logos action. When a culture decides that feeling safe is more important than being capable, it has signed its own death warrant. Look at the hard data. We have skyrocketing suicide rates among men who are drugged into compliance for displaying masculine traits. While family courts operate on the tender years doctrine, a feminist fabrication ensuring that maternal feelings supersede paternal rights. The divorce courts are not interested in the truth of who is the better parent. They are interested in the comfort of the mother and the extraction of resources from the father. This is the feminization of the law, replacing the blind scales of justice with the weeping eyes of the therapeutic state. We are building a society of safe spaces that are utterly unsafe for truth-tellers. The remedy to this infection is dialectical detachment. You must refuse to be drawn into the emotional whirlpool. The mental health industry, now a wholly owned subsidiary of cultural Marxism, seeks to pathologize your stoicism and label your rationality as a disorder. They want to prescribe you SSRIs to numb your masculine drive. Rejected. The red-pilled man stands firm in the tradition of the Stoics and the Scholastics. When faced with the listening trap, do not become an emotional tampon. Remain the immovable rock of Gibraltar. Offer the solution once, clearly and concisely, as a supreme act of charity. If it is rejected, withdraw your energy. Do not engage in the circular logic of the neurotic. Preserve your logos. Your competence is your shield, your logic is your sword, and your refusal to validate lies is the only way to burn away the fog of this modern Babylon. The rejection of logos for the comfort of the herd is not merely a corporate inconvenience. It is the mechanism of the glass cellar, a term of art to describe the basement of society where men are forced to toil and die in obscurity while the glass ceiling is marketed as the only oppression in existence. A lie so vast it blocks out the sun. I witnessed this when a senior engineer was purged for the violence of his competence, his toxic leadership style merely being the directness required to ship product, while the diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI hire who presided over a disaster of mismanagement was promoted to protect the narrative, proving that the modern workplace is a rigged casino where the house gynocentric, Marxist, and pathological always wins, the sanctioned scapegoat, institutional misandry, and the metaphysics of hate. I didn't realize my leadership style was intimidating. I thought it was competent. These were the bitter parting words of a senior engineer I watched being escorted from a Fortune 500 building by security. His crime was not fraud, theft, or failure, but the violence of assertion in a sterile, feminized corporate hellscape. While this man, a master of the apprenticeship ladder who had coded the very architecture the company rested upon, was cast into the glass cellar of unemployment for exhibiting the natural virtues of the West's strength, directness, and reason. A neighboring department head, a woman hired via the Rooney Rule diversity mandate, presided over a 40% drop in productivity and a viral catastrophe of mismanagement, yet was quietly promoted to a senior strategy role to avoid the PR nightmare of admitting a mistake. This is not an anomaly. It is the operational code of our institutions. We are witnessing the weaponization of incompetence against excellence, where the masculine transcendental of truth is sacrificed on the altar of the feminine idol of comfort, creating a corporate gulag where the only sin is being a capable man. To understand this systemic betrayal, we must strip the bark off the language and look at the etymological rot beneath. The term misogyny, derived from the Greek misos, hatred, and gune, woman, has been expanded by cultural Marxists to include any disagreement with feminist dogma, effectively rendering the word meaningless. However, misandry, misos plus a ner man, remains strictly defined to deny its existence, creating a linguistic shield for state-sponsored hatred. The definition of socially accepted misandry is thus a systemic prejudice that interprets masculine traits as pathologies while framing feminine vices as virtues. We see this in the glass cellar, the statistical reality that men occupy 92% of the workplace fatalities and the most dangerous, dirty jobs in existence, while the glass ceiling remains a mythical construct to explain away the lack of female representation in the top 1% of earners. The system does not hate men for what they do, it hates men for what they are. The illogical nature of this hatred can be exposed through a simple syllogism that dismantles the leftist framing. Major premise: a just society applies laws and standards universally, adhering to the natural law of non-contradiction. Minor premise: current laws and social mores explicitly punish men for traits praised in women, e.g., assertiveness is toxic in men but empowering in women, creating a dual standard of justice. Conclusion: therefore, society is fundamentally unjust and operates on a lie, necessitating a complete rejection of its moral authority. This is not mere incompetence. It is the metaphysics of hate, a spiritual disease where the civil society associations of the West are dissolved to make way for a totalitarian bureaucracy that demands men be nothing more than beastly utilities. Tax cattle to be milked and slaughtered in the family courts to fund the very gynocentrism that enslaves them. Consider the Duluth model, a vile piece of feminist jurisprudence that has infected our legal system like a cancer. This framework assumes that in any domestic dispute, the male is the perpetrator and the female the victim, regardless of facts, turning the Western tradition of due process, the presumption of innocence, into a cruel joke. I have seen men arrested for calling the police on their violent wives, hauled away in handcuffs because the state requires a sacrifice to the goddess of equity. This model asserts that domestic violence is a tool of patriarchal control, yet biological reality and police arrest rates show that women initiate physical aggression in relationships just as often as men, if not more so when you account for reciprocal violence. By criminalizing masculinity itself, the state enforces a tyranny of the female vote and female interest, effectively dismantling the mixed constitution, the balance of powers, to install an ochlocracy of emotion. The lineage of this poison traces directly back to the Frankfurt School and the critical theory designed to destroy the Western family unit. The goal was never equality. The goal was the eradication of the father, the priesthood of the household, to make the state the primary provider and moral authority. These wicked liars, cheating men of their birthright, utilize the Ghana bias, a cognitive distortion where we minimize the agency of women and maximize the responsibility of men to convince you that the parasite is the host. The remedy for this degeneracy is not found in angry protest, which feeds their narrative, but in the remedy of the monastery. We must return to the stoic withdrawal of our labor, our commitment, and our genius from a system that despises us. By starving the parasitic structures of the male vitality that sustains them, we do not retreat. We allow the modern Babylon to collapse under the weight of its own inefficiency and lies, preserving our souls for a future worth building. Starving the beast is the essential first strike of the resistance, yet it remains a defensive measure unless we identify the original breach in our spiritual armor. The cultural Marxist contagion did not wait for your induction into the workforce to hollow you out. It was administered in the home, where your innate masculine telos was diagnosed as a disorder and systematically dismantled by the soft tyranny of compassion. You cannot reclaim the high culture of the West while remaining a psychological serf to your upbringing. We must now apply the cold scalpel of the trivium to the domestic sphere, shattering the most protected class in the gynocentric lexicon to expose the radical parenting psyop for what it is. The factory floor of compliance slavery, the nursery of serfdom, parenting as a tool of oppression and the cycle of betrayal. Tell a man his wife is cheating, he demands proof. Tell a man his mother conditioned him for servitude, and he reaches for the smelling salts. This aphorism, cold as a scalpel, cuts through the sentimental slush of modern family dynamics to reveal the festering necrosis underneath. You have been sold a fairy tale, a Disney-fied hallucination where the home is a sanctuary and the mother is a saint. But in the harsh light of the red pill, we must apply the same ruthless skepticism to our origins that we applied to the divorce courts. You are instructed to honor your parents, yet the very commandment designed to secure social order has been weaponized by a gynocentric culture to extract blind obedience from men long after childhood ends. You must break the spell. You must look at your upbringing, not as a series of benign misunderstandings, but as a deliberate, if often subconscious, breaking of the male spirit. When your mother shushed your boisterous energy or your father told you to just do what the teacher says to keep the peace, They weren't protecting you. They were castrating the warrior within to appease the gods of domestic tranquility. You were drafted into a war before you could speak, and your first commanders were often the very people who claimed to love you most, training you to seek female approval as the highest good, and to view masculine assertion as a sin requiring immediate penance. Consider the syllogism of the soul, a logical construct that the matriarchal educational complex dares not whisper. Major premise: a child requires the development of virtue, specifically courage, resilience, and stoicism, to become a functional, autonomous adult, capable of navigating a hostile world. Minor premise: radical parenting with its obsession with safetyism, emotional incontinence, and helicopter hovering, actively suppresses these virtues in favor of obedience, fragility, and dependency. Conclusion: therefore, radical parenting is not an act of love. It is an act of child abuse against the soul of the boy. We see the wreckage of this logic in the public school systems, the indoctrination camps where the natural hierarchy of competence is flattened into an egalitarian sludge. Boys are no longer judged by the apprenticeship mastery ladder of old, where skill and grit earned rank. They are judged by their willingness to sit still, shut up, and parrot the neuroses of aging spinsters. When a boy acts like a boy, when he exhibits the evolutionary biological drive to compete, to wrestle, to conquer, we do not channel that energy into the mastery of a craft. We drug him. The ADHD epidemic is nothing short of a chemical lobotomy, a pharmaceutical gagging order enforced by a system that pathologizes masculinity because it fears the untamed male spirit as a threat to its bureaucratic serfdom. We must confront the betrayal of the mother, a taboo so potent it strikes fear into the hearts of even the most hardened rationalists, yet Schopenhauer's ghost laughs at our cowardice. The mother-son dynamic, stripped of the sentimental Victorian varnish, is often the first conspiracy of lies a man encounters. Women by nature and strategy seek resources and security, and in a gynocentric social order, the son is not a future patriarch to be forged, but a utility to be domesticated. The overprotective mother is not expressing superfluous love. She is engaging in a soft power psychological operation to sever the boy from his natural masculine instincts, ensuring he remains a docile provider rather than a dangerous rebel. She instills in him the deadly vice of niceness, the surest path to the gutters of nihilism, by teaching him to prioritize female comfort over truth and male vitality. She primes him for the slaughterhouse of family court, where his learned subservience will be exploited by a system designed to extract his wealth and strip his children. The daddy issues dialectic follows in lockstep by demonizing or removing the father, the living embodiment of logos, order, and law. The state creates a vacuum that it eagerly fills. A population of men with daddy issues is a population of useful idiots, looking for a surrogate parent in the government, begging for the welfare teat and the strong hand of the tyrant to soothe the ache of their abandoned initiation. The radical parenting psyop is the cornerstone of this nursery of serfdom, a sophisticated method of breaking the will of the male child to produce compliant, docile serfs for the managerial class. It is the domestication of the human animal, mirroring the way we breed cattle for docility, only we do it with guilt, shame, and the weaponization of empathy. We are told that it takes a village, but that village is a mob of resentful ideologues seeking to sacrifice your potential on the altar of equality. They redefine good parenting as the production of a gender-neutral, androgynous worker drone incapable of independent thought, a creature that feels but cannot reason, that submits but cannot fight. This is the feminization as weakness that presages the fall of every great civilization. When the virtues of the barracks and the workshop are replaced by the hysterias of the nursery, the barbarians, not just at the gates, but already inside them, will inevitably win. The leftist dogma requires the destruction of the father's authority because the father represents the bridge to the real world, the harsh truth that competence requires struggle. Without him, the child remains an eternal infant, prey to the manipulations of the state and the whims of toxic femininity. But there is a remedy, a return to the ancient paths of the Western canon, if you have the stomach for the ascent. We must reclaim the patriarchal role not as a tyranny of fists, but as the heavy, glorious burden of stewardship. The father must become the anti-venom to the cultural Marxist rot, actively deprogramming his sons from the lies they inhale with every breath of the modern air. This requires the formation of civil society as resistance, independent masculine spaces that function as the guilds and lodges of old, immune to the suffocating scrutiny of the diversity officer. We must build the apprenticeship mastery ladder anew in our own homes and private associations, teaching our sons that value is not given, but earned through the sweat of the brow and the forge of the mind. We must instill the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, not as school subjects, but as weapons of the soul, so that when the lie comes dressed in the robe of compassion, they can dissect it with the scalpel of truth. This is the only way to break the cycle of betrayal. You must become the father you perhaps never had, the logos incarnate, standing between your legacy and the encroaching darkness, declaring with a voice of thunder that the nursery of serfdom is closed, and the academy of free men is now in session. You stand now at the exit of the Plato's cave of genocentrism, blinking in the harsh, searing sunlight of truth, but do not shield your eyes. This is the clarity you were denied. You have been dragged through the muck of your own programming, forced to stare at the bloody ledger where you were expected to sign away your sovereignty for a tepid smile and the privilege of funding a dinner date that was nothing more than a loyalty test for a simp. You now see the lost wallet not as a clumsy accident requiring your chivalrous rescue, but as a calculated probe of your weakness, a dialectical feint designed to measure how quickly you will sell your birthright of logos for the mess of pottage called female validation. You have learned that the comfort she demands is the pillow she uses to smother your competence, and that the radical parenting tips you once considered compassionate are merely the soft, fascistic tools of a decaying civilization trying to castrate the spirit of the next generation of men before they can even hold a sword. You have absorbed the bitter, necessary medicine of Schopenhauer. The romantic haze has lifted, revealing the cold, hard geometry of biological interests, and the evolutionary imperative that drives the fairer sex to hypergamy and, when unchecked, tyranny. Consider the architecture of the trap you have just dismantled. You are armed with the trivium, grammar to name your enemy, logic to dissect their lies, and rhetoric to crush their narrative. You possess the syllogism that sets you free. Major premise: a just society rewards competence and virtue. Minor premise: the current genocentric order punishes competence, toxic masculinity, and rewards victimhood, female privilege. Conclusion: therefore, the system is illegitimate, and your withdrawal of consent is a moral imperative. Look at the scoreboard of this war. 80% of suicides are men, 90% of workplace deaths are men. And fathers are stripped of their children in family courts with a bureaucratic efficiency that would make a totalitarian regime blush. Yet the cathedral of woke screams that you are the oppressor. It is a lie so audacious, it almost commands respect, like a pickpocket blaming the victim for having bulky pockets. You are not a deadbeat for refusing to pay for a date's gambling debts. You are a steward of resources, a guardian of the oikonomia of your own life, refusing to cast your pearls before swine or your credit card before a solipsistic test of your subservience. Your ignorance is cured. You cannot unsee the strings of the puppet master, nor can you unhear the dog whistle of emotional labor, which is nothing more than a demand that you abandon the solutions-oriented mind that built the very roof over her head. You have reclaimed the concepts of due process and natural law from the fog of feminist dialectics. You know now that the mother-son complex weaponized by the state and pup psychology serves only to create docile serfs, severing the apprenticeship mastery ladder that turns boys into men of the West. The mental herpes of therapy speak. This obsession with feelings over facts, comfort over competence, has been excised from your psyche by the red-hot iron of rationality. You are no longer a utility, a walking wallet, or an emotional tampon to be discarded when the icky feelings subside. You are a sovereign entity, a locus of order in a chaotic void, and you hold the line of Western civilization in your refusal to apologize for your strength, your logic, and your refusal to submit to the lost wallet shakedown ever again. Go forth with this shield of cynicism and sword of truth, brothers. Do not hoard this wisdom like a miser in his counting house. Spread this gospel to the blue-pilled masses, still slumbering in the matrix of female primacy. Share it with the young man buying drinks he cannot afford for a woman who despises him. Share it with the father ground down by a system that hates his authority. You have paid the price of admission to reality, and while the truth is a hard master, it is the only one that pays in the currency of freedom. The shadows of the cave are seductive, but they are empty. You have chosen the light, the good, and the beautiful ruggedness of the unvarnished real. Now act accordingly. And now the sponsored book, Introduction Truth and the Age of Lies, a guide to navigating the information wars. Look around. Every screen you see pumps out lies faster than truth can catch up. I've been there, staring at the flood of fake news and AI-generated distortions, feeling the ground shift under my feet. They called me paranoid when I questioned the COVID death counts in 2020. Then the CDC quietly revised the numbers downward by 40%. They laughed when I said social media algorithms radicalize teens. Now the Surgeon General issues warnings about it. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. You're tired of being gaslit by journalists who call riots peaceful protests. Tired of seeing deepfakes of politicians saying things they never said. Tired of getting mocked for demanding evidence, only to watch the narrative collapse months later. I wrote this book because I nearly lost my family to disinformation. My wife believed a viral hoax about vaccine side effects. It took 3 days of forensic source checks, methods you'll learn in the Verification Arsenal chapter, to prove it was a Russian bot farm's creation. That's when I realized truth isn't passive. It's a weapon you must forge yourself. This manual is for rational men who lead, men who protect, men who value evidence over emotion. Inside, you'll master battlefield skills like time travel verification to fact-check historical claims using satellite archives. You'll build cognitive war games to simulate propaganda attacks before they hit. You'll dissect media corpses in the media autopsy lab with tools that expose the Covington Kids smears. These aren't theories, they're trench-tested tactics from my 20 years as a data forensics engineer. If you're the type who thinks toxic masculinity is a real term, stop reading now. Go knit a sweater. This book is for red-pilled men ready to arm themselves against institutional decay. For fathers creating family firewalls against TikTok brain rot. For debaters using linguistic forensics to shred opponents' false stats in seconds. Your reality is under assault. Either you weaponize facts or you become collateral damage. Buy this book, Dominate the Information War, Truth in the Age of Lies. A guide to navigating the information wars. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description.